Hello, I'm Dr. Greg Joachim, and this is a video recap of a presentation that I delivered at the 2024 EASM Conference, that's the European Association of Sport Management, in Paris, France, earlier this month, September 2024. It's entitled Lessons from Using Human-Centered Design Thinking in Sport Management Education, and it's me recounting some of my experiences using the human-centered design thinking process in the management classroom for sport management students, as well as in a communications classroom with a sport management challenge. And the differences and the similarities between these two are very interesting to unpack. In this video, I'll define design thinking for you very quickly, very briefly, but so that you have enough context to follow along. I'll tell you how I teach design thinking in two different subjects across two different faculty at a large university of technology. And then I'll talk about the contribution that sport and leisure as a pursuit, so us participating in sport or leisure activities, how that might contribute back to positive outcomes using design thinking in any classroom. So, what is design thinking? Broadly speaking, design thinking is a user-centered method for generating innovation in non-design contexts. Now, innovation is the most common outcome for human-centered design thinking, but it's not the only one. I actually prefer to think of it as a theory of practice, and this has been established in the literature as well. As I'll explain as the video goes on, this is actually the direction in which I'm moving with the subjects that I teach. In the management context, of course, under which sport management is a subfield, design thinking is defined as the ostensive and the performative dimensions, that's the thinking and the doing, of expert designers. This could be graphic designers, this could be product designers, this could be architects, city planners, anywhere design is done by experts in that approach. How the thinking and the doing of those fields are adopted by non-expert designers in non-design contexts. So in our case, sport managers. Now, why would we want to use design thinking in the classroom or anywhere else? Design thinking allows us to pursue abductive leaps of logic. Whenever we are trying to seize upon an opportunity or maybe solve a problem more commonly, we start with a single data point, right? When we have encountered the problem, we understand how we have encountered it. We may not understand the problem fully, but we understand that we have a problem. Now, how do we start to work out what that problem is, the size of it, the scope of it, to say nothing of how to solve it? We start investigating. So we have our single dot point, which leads us to another dot point. Once we start looking into a few things, we understand more about it. Our view of that dot is refined. And we continue this process. We continue through trial and error and research to understand more about the problem or the opportunity. And eventually, this leads us all the way down a funnel to something. Now, in the management context, this is most often where we stop because this has solved our problem, right? It might be the cheapest thing, it might be the quickest thing to implement, it might be the easiest thing to implement. Whatever the case, it gets the job done. The problem is solved. However, the problem may not have been solved optimally, and this is because we got trapped in our inductive and deductive funnel of solving the problem, and the real value lies somewhere else, and we were never going to find it because we were trapped in this funnel. Human-centered design thinking, and specifically the version of it that I use in my classroom, helps us to break out of this cycle of induction and deduction, our traditional approaches to problem solving, and obtain these abductive leaps of logic. Now, the way that I like to explain how all of this might unfold in a real-life situation is to ask you to picture yourself in your kitchen. You might be thinking to yourself that you want some cookies. You want some chocolate chip cookies. What you'll need to do, of course, is to see what ingredients for chocolate chip cookies do you have on hand. Do I have flour? Do I have milk? Do I have sugar? Do I have chocolate chips? Do I have brown sugar? Everything that you need to make these cookies. You might have some of it, you might have all of it. Anything that you don't have, you have to go to the store and acquire. You come back, you make the cookies following the recipe, and voila, you have your cookies. The other approach that you might take when you're in your kitchen is to see what ingredients you have on hand. Maybe you want to cook something, you're hungry for something, but you don't want to go to the store, so you're just going to look and see what can I make out of the ingredients that I have on hand. And this might be the ingredients that you need to make cookies. This might be something to make a ham and cheese sandwich. You don't really mind so long as you don't have to go to the store, right? That's your main objective. You want to eat, but you don't want to go to the store. These are the traditional approaches to problem solving. Abduction, on the other hand, would have us question all of the assumptions that even led us to this situation. In other words, it would ask us to think Why are we even in the kitchen? Maybe we're just bored. Maybe we don't want cookies at all. Maybe we're not even hungry. Maybe we wandered into the kitchen because we didn't know what else to do and we're a little bit shiftless. Maybe we need to go for a walk. And going for a walk might actually have some other positive benefits that will reveal themselves as this video goes on. Here you see a photo that I took during my PhD studies, I think in 2016 or 2017, and the joke among me and my colleagues who have seen this photo many times is that this image at this point is world famous. Now that I've taken it to Europe, it is truly world famous. But the joke in recent years has been, if I had understood how important this photo would be, and I snapped it just off the cuff as I came into the uni one day. This is a park across the street from where I used to live. You can see that it very handily illustrates the difference between expert design, which is the footpath veering off to the right, and the user experience of just wanting to take the shortest distance to the highway crossing in the background. You'll see some folks at the end of that desire path, we call it. I like to call it a cow path, headed toward that traffic light. Now, the interesting thing about this photo is that the built footpath is newer than the dirt desire path. All that designers had to do to deliver an excellent user experience would have been to come in and just pave the path where people were already literally voting with their feet that this is the way they want to go. So when I say that the designers went in a different direction, you can see that I'm being literal. But in recent years, I've started to joke that if I had understood the importance that this photo would have in my ongoing career, I would have moved the rubbish bin out of the way of the center of the photo. Now, a very thoughtful and Photoshop proficient student of mine last year took it upon themselves to digitally erase that rubbish bin out of the photo and send me the cleaned up version. And although that was very sweet and thoughtful of the student, and I really appreciated it at the time and expressed that to them, it actually gave me, even more usefully, another illustration of how user experience sometimes can differ from design. In this case, the student erased the bin for me, and I thought that that is what I wanted. As the user, I thought that's the user experience that I wanted, a cleaned up image. But actually what I found is I missed being able to make my little joke about I would have moved the bin out of the way, because I use that, as I've used it in this video, very often as a bit of an icebreaker photo to explain design thinking to an audience, and I like to make that little joke to kind of loosen the atmosphere. And so what I actually wanted was to be able to make the joke about the bin, and how I wish I would have moved it out of the way. I didn't actually want it out of the photo. Now I'll take you through how I teach design thinking in two different subjects across faculty at a large university of technology in Australia. The first is a subject called Innovation Lab. An Innovation Lab is run in the business school, in the management department, for management students and a few others who come in from other fields and take it as an elective. Sometimes we get, for example, digital and creative enterprise students taking this subject. But by and large, it's management students, and this includes, at the university, our sport management students. Within this subject, they design entre- and intrapreneurial ideas, which is to say that they create a brand new business idea based on their design thinking efforts, and then within an individual project, they come up with an intrapreneurial idea for an existing organization, most often one that they currently work at or in some way are affiliated with. The other subject is called Design Thinking for Social Innovation and runs in our Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, specifically in the School of Communication. So these are non-management students, and it's worth noting as well that they are working for real-world clients here using the same design thinking process that I'll introduce to you on the next slide as Innovation Lab, but toward a different end. They're working for an existing organization that most often is pursuing some kind of social justice outcome. One example of this is the Australian Federal Police and their anti-slavery work. As I just alluded to, here you see the 5-stage Stanford D-School design thinking process. This is used as the structure and the process in both Innovation Lab and Design Thinking for Social Innovation. The dot points that you see on this particular graphic are the ways that I teach all 5 of these stages to Innovation Lab students, and then Design Thinking for Social Innovation uses very similar things. But to stick with the management context for the purposes of this presentation, you can see that in the empathize stage of the process, I teach them how to use conversations with users, i.e. interviews, semi-structured interviews, as well as immersing themselves in the problem space or the opportunity space and observing users in natural settings. This is what we call their empathy data collection. Once they have collected all of their data, they then interpret this through analysis tools such as a persona, which can be thought of as a one-size-fits-most concept of their user, a journey map, which captures the way that that user moves through their life experience, especially within the problem or the opportunity space, and then an empathy map that captures what the user sees, thinks, feels, does, says while they're in that problem or opportunity space. Once they've analyzed their empathy data, they move on to defining their problem or their opportunity, and they do this through two different statements: a POV statement, which is the point of view of the user persona specifically, and how might we questions that actually try to address a core problem identified in the POV statement, an unmet need of the user. From here, they move into ideation, where we use a structured brainstorming activity called the lightning decision jam, which alternates between individual and group periods of activity. But you can really use any number of creative exercises. This is really just the one that we use in class to give us some kind of structure to work with. Once the idea has been generated, they move into prototyping and testing that idea iteratively. Prototypes are put together most often as interactive wireframes because students, by and large, tend to come up with digital solutions, be that a mobile app or a website or a platform of some kind. But as well, if they're designing something a little more abstract like a service to deliver, this could be captured in something like a storyboard, which could look like a comic book of how a user would encounter and engage with and navigate whatever that service happens to be. And all through this process, they're testing it, which sees them revisit the techniques that they used in their empathizing, to have conversations with users about the prototype, to immerse themselves in the use of the prototype, and then also to observe users engaging with the prototype in their natural settings. In an ideal world, this process of design thinking would continue, and iteration after iteration after iteration would be completed. But of course, we are bound to a 12-week semester, and so all of these stages are broken up, with ideation getting the most time spent. So there are 2 weeks spent on ideation, and with students doing a lot of independent work outside of the classroom, and then coming back to the classroom to check their work with me or their tutor. The assessments across both subjects are similar but also meaningfully different in very interesting ways. Both have 30% of the marks wrapped up in group projects and 70% wrapped up in individual work, but especially the individual project differs between the two. The group project in both cases sees them complete their empathy work and deliver a report on that research and analysis. In the case of Innovation Lab, this is a video summary. In Design Thinking for Social Innovation, this is a written report. In Innovation Lab, they then go through ideation, prototyping, and testing and do a final pitch with their entrepreneurial idea. So they're actually looking for investment or partnership or whatever it is they need to get their idea off the ground. And in Design Thinking for Social Innovation, they're, of course, pitching back to the client that they're working for. Here's what we've come up with for you. And we actually see quite a bit of uptake with the clients using the ideas that the students have come up with. The individual project, however, is quite different between the two. In Innovation Lab, this is an intrapreneurial project, so the students actually choose an existing organization and go through the design thinking process for that organization to solve some problem or capitalize upon some opportunity that they identify through their research. And then they do a pitch deck for this and a reflective essay at the end of the semester where they can reflect upon either the individual or the group project or both. In Design Thinking for Social Innovation, however, they use a reflective journal throughout the entire semester, and school of communication students are a bit more practiced with this than our management students, so we see some very interesting things come through. However, the use of reflection in both subjects highlights how important that is to the design thinking process, and this is something that I'll unpack later in the video. It's worth noting that I am in the process of changing the assessment structure within Innovation Lab, so this is the management subject, away from a final pitch and more toward an infomercial. So rather focusing on investability, focusing more on the usefulness of the idea that's been generated by the team, and allowing them to have a little bit more fun in how they present that. So we're actually going to have a bit of a film festival playing all of these infomercials. And then I've eliminated the pitch deck part of the individual assessment because this was always delivered as slides only, and not everybody is well suited to putting together, for example, infographics that speak for themselves. So I've eliminated that portion, and I'm looking at how to build more and more reflection, and I'm even considering using things like podcasts or video documentary series that the students could put together, maybe in partnership with other students in the subject. Now, ultimately, the direction that I would like to go with these two subjects is to see them combined into a single transdisciplinary subject that maybe we'll call something like Design Thinking Lab. The idea is that if we bring together the fields of business, arts and social sciences, as well as sport and leisure and any other field, we naturally increase the diversity of perspectives. Now, why is this important? In a study of the design thinking practices of organizations of differing sizes in 3 different industries, Carlgren et al. Discovered the mindsets, techniques, approaches, practices, principles used by these design thinkers. These ultimately came to resemble the 5 stages of the Stanford D-School process. User focus, of course, can relate very easily back to empathizing with users, but they are meaningfully different, especially the last point, which is diversity. Here we mean diversity of perspectives rather than diversity of background, but you could, of course, have diversity of perspectives derived from diversity of background. But what we mean by diversity of perspectives is maybe diversity across the hierarchy of the organization, that you have everybody from a volunteer or an intern involved all the way up to the CEO. So you're capturing all these different life experiences as well as different perspectives from within the organization about what might be feasible, if not desirable. Hence, if we bring all of these fields together, we are generating a diversity of perspectives across these fields, across students that have differing interests, different career ambitions, different books that they're reading outside of class, different movies that they're watching, different ways they're coming to uni, different ways that they approach their work. If they all come together, everyone in every field benefits from this. This leads me to my final point, which is the contribution that sport and leisure as pursuit might actually contribute positively to design thinking outcomes. In his ceaselessly fascinating book, Stand Out of Our Light, which he wrote after winning the 9 Dot Prize, James Williams makes very interesting connections between philosophy and leisure and the pursuit of and the development of culture and creativity. Some very interesting quotes here for you to consider. Leisure is akin to what Aristotle called periodic non-thought, which is getting outside of your experience, getting outside of your head, basically. In counterposing leisure with work, Hannah Arendt seems to be using the term leisure to refer to something like a respite from having to perform attentional labor. Now, what is the meaning of all of this? This is about getting outside of our usual pursuits, getting outside of our usual way of doing things, our usual daily movements, our usual daily tasks and thought patterns to create something novel. And all of this might come together for culture. The philosopher Joseph Piper even argued in 1948 that leisure is the basis of culture, the unconscious ground out of which not only individual but also collective values and meaning-making processes emerge. Now, with design thinking being exactly this, exactly a meaning-making process that derives from collective values, that derives from a diversity of perspectives, sport and leisure then might have a role to play. We've already established the importance of reflection to all of this. We know that expert designers not only reflect upon their designs constantly, this is a part of the design process, but they also reflect upon their practice, reflect upon what they're creating, and reflect upon how they're creating it. And in this way, they are constantly developing and evolving. Now, some of this is what we've lost a bit when we ported some of those design ways of thinking and doing into the management context, and we need to get it back. Leisure might be the way to do that. If we've brought together all of the fields, business, arts and social sciences, sport and leisure, and everything else to create a diversity of perspectives in a transdisciplinary unit, sport and leisure might actually have something to contribute back to all of those fields, to enable those periods of non-thought, respite from our traditional way of doing things, and to come together to generate collective values and meaning through this structured process. Thank you very much. I hope that you found all of this interesting. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me via email or on LinkedIn if you'd like to discuss some of the things that I'm doing in the classroom. As I said, I'm continually evolving the Subject Innovation Lab specifically. I'm about to completely blow it up and start from scratch in the next semester. And so I'm thinking about different ways of conducting assessments, but all with a focus on how to generate the best and deepest reflection on the part of my students. Thanks again.